Welcome to the Happiness Podcast. I'm Dr. Robert Puff. Sometimes in life we go through really hard times that are honestly just hard to explain. Why is this happening to me? What's going on? This isn't fair. I didn't deserve this. Do these phrases sound familiar? You may be going through a time right now where you're saying these very things. Suffering in life can be so challenging. Do we just have to grin and bear it until it's over? Or will it ever end? May I have to live with this the rest of my life? And if that's so, do I even want to live anymore? These are some of many questions that we can ask ourselves when we're going through difficult times. But I want to talk about ways that we can heal and move forward and address suffering in appropriate ways so one, we resolve it, and two, it just doesn't linger as long. The first thing we want to do that's critical is differentiate between suffering and pain. Pain is the actual event that is happening. We may be going through a divorce right now. We may be being sued by someone. We may have lost our job. We may have nowhere to live and be homeless right now. Or we may be suffering some physical pain as a result of some illness we're struggling with, like heart disease or cancer. Suffering, on the other hand, is the stories that we're hearing in our head about what's going on. And if we've lived long enough, we know that there are people out there going through what we're going through and have done it well. It didn't create a lot of suffering from them. They just dealt with it and moved on. Maybe not many, but we all know people like that. And as long as there are people going through what we've gone through, or any form of pain, then that shows there must be other options besides the suffering that we're experiencing right now, the stories that we're hearing in our head. So what we need to decide is, am I going to add to my pain? And I add to my pain by creating stories, by telling myself stories, which in no way alleviate the pain and often can make it worse. Let's say we lost our job because they have an early start time and we're just not morning people, and it's so hard for us to get there on time that unfortunately a few times we got there late, and because of that, they fired us. Rent's due in a couple weeks, we have bills to pay, we have to eat, and we're nervous. We don't know how things are going to go. Are we going to be able to find another job? What does this mean? Did I really mess up? Is there something wrong with me? What if I can never find a job again? I mean, the stories we create can be so scary and truly unhelpful. And they're unhelpful because we already have to deal with being out of work. And that's what we focus on instead. Instead of telling us all these stories that may or may not be true, instead we focus on, well, what can I learn from that? We might say, well, I'm going to really stay away from early morning jobs. They're just not a good fit for me. I'll apply to jobs that they start 9 or later. That's a good decision. And then next, we may contemplate, well, I do have bills coming up. I need to pay my rent. So how am I going to tackle that? Perhaps I can apply for unemployment. Perhaps I can find a temporary job where they pay me right away. Perhaps I can reach out to family or friends for a loan to get by in this tough time. Instead of focusing in on what went wrong and what's wrong with us or what's wrong about this other person, like why did they fire us? They're so unfair. We focus on solutions to this problem, whatever the problem is. And we stop ruminating on things that aren't helpful, that aren't going to solve anything, like what did we do wrong? Or do we really deserve this? Or they're so evil for what they did to us. It's just life. Life happens. And guess what? It can be very unfair at times. I don't know why. Perhaps you do. But I think a better approach is to focus on solutions to the problem at hand. If we're out of work, then we have to come up with other ways to make money and support ourselves. Maybe we can move back home. Maybe we can get someone to move in with us and help pay for the rent. That's what we focus on, solutions to our problems, not adding to our pain already. We already lost our job. How is it going to be helpful? By criticizing us, by ruminating over and over again how unfair life is? Those are questions that are just going to lead to the path of suffering. A far better approach is to look to find solutions to the current situation and the problems at hand. We have pain. How do we reduce this pain right now? A lot of times our mental thoughts are like having a bruise on our hand and taking a hammer to our hand. They're making it worse. They're really not helping us. Instead, we focus on what can we do, one, to make our hearts better, and two, to solve this problem. Is there anything we can do to make this situation better? Now let's take a tougher type example, because I think it will be harder to come up with solutions, but they're there, and I want to explore them with you. Because if they're in a situation like this, I think they're in a situation whatever we find ourselves in. Let's say we have children, and they're older, and they're out with their friends, because now they drive. We bought them a car so they'd have the freedom to go to work, go to school, and be out with their friends, and we like that. But one day, they don't come home, and it's late, and we finally get a knock on the door, and we're very worried, and we open up the door, and there's a police officer standing there, and our heart is about ready to burst, because the police officer tells us that our daughter's been killed by a drunk driver. Now that's pain. That is as much pain as we will ever go through. We may see different types of pain, but pain doesn't get any harder than this. So, where would suffering be involved, and where would solution be involved in this type of situation? Well, the suffering is the stories we tell ourselves that keep us stuck, that don't help us move forward, and don't give us any solution to why did this pain happen. For example, a suffering words that we might hear in our head is, why did this happen? I don't understand. Did I deserve this? Am I being punished by God for something that I did? These words are the path of suffering. They may be natural, but if we keep going over and over in our head, this is the path of suffering. And if you've ever known anyone who's lost their child, it is so hard. And of course there's going to be pain and anguish there. But the suffering would be the stories that we can tell ourselves. Like, now that my child is dead, I will never be happy again. Do you know how many people in life have lost children? If you study history, if you were a parent, say 150 years ago, your children probably, most of them, died before you. That's how life is. It isn't fair, it isn't unfair, it's just life. But when life happens, there are always things we can do to help it, to make it better, to give solutions to the problem. So in this instance, for example, there are many things we could do to take the pain away, or at least alleviate it and make it better. For instance, we could get involved with a support group where other parents have lost their children to drunk drivers. And these support groups are so helpful, giving us support for our loss. They are wonderful, and I'd highly recommend seeking help from professionals or from other people who can really help us heal from instances like this. Another thing we can do is proactively help make our world a better place. Have you ever heard of MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Drivers? Well, you probably know this got started by mothers who had lost their children to drunk drivers. And they have had a huge impact on the legal system and making it so when you get a DUI, it's not just a slap on the hand anymore. It has severe consequences because they're really trying to get drunk drivers off the road. And that you could get involved with. There's just so many different things you could do to create solutions for your life. And when we focus on the solutions, the pain does heal. It always heals. But if we stay stuck in the mental suffering, it can stay there for the rest of our lives. The key is focus on solutions to make it better. I know you may be thinking, but there's no way this can be better. It can be better. If you've lost someone you love, then it is time to study impermanence and to realize that that is how life works. Fighting life makes us suffer. If we expect everyone in our lives to outlive us, we're probably going to suffer horribly. If we realize the people that we love, some of them are going to die, and that's just part of life, and we're going to be so grateful for the time we had with them. That is the solution towards reducing the pain. Life throws us so many different things that cause us pain. Our approach to reduce the pain is one, not to add suffering to it through our mental thinking, but instead proactively do things to alleviate the pain. And there are always things we can do. And if we don't know what to do, then our goal is to find things that we can do, because there is always something we can do to make the pain better. That's what we focus on, not on why is this happening to me, not on what did I do to deserve this, not on life is so unfair. I know these are valid questions, but they can keep us stuck. Instead, we focus on what can I do to make this better right now? And things that we can really do. There's so many different options we have in all situations to make it a little bit better. No, if we're blind, we're not going to see again. No, if we lost a limb, it's not going to grow back. But there are other things we can do to make our lives better. I mean, we all know people that can't see that have beautiful lives. We all know people that have lost limbs that have turned out spectacularly. It's not about what happened. It's about what we do with what happened. I mean, we all know the story of Helen Keller. She couldn't see or hear, and she became one of the greatest spokespersons in history. Obviously, life doesn't have to go a certain way for us to be happy. It's more we have to focus on when life isn't going the way that we want. What is the solution? And sometimes it's just acceptance. All right, I get it. This is the truth. I'm never going to walk again. I'm in a wheelchair. I get that. And I shouldn't have been drinking and driving because that's what caused it. But what can I learn from this going forward? And it's not going to help me to beat myself up. I'm going to get involved in doing things that I love to do, even in a wheelchair. So whatever life throws us, we get divorced, we lose the love of our lives, we lose our job. There's just always something we can do instead. And that's our focus, to focus on solutions and not staying stuck. If we are suffering, I know this is going to be hard to hear, but it's our fault. But the great news is, it's also completely within our power to change it. And this is done by, instead of ruminating on things that won't make any difference, unless we're using that time to heal. But if we're not healing, outside of that, we don't think about it. Instead, we do things that make our lives better right now, whatever that may be. That's our focus. Our focus is on changing our thoughts so that we begin to see things differently and learn to not only fight what has happened, but perhaps even accept it and say, okay, I get this. I don't like that this happened at all, and I'm never going to completely forget what happens, of course, but I am going to focus on having a beautiful life regardless that this thing has happened. I can do both. I can remember the pain, but also move forward and live my life well. We can all have beautiful lives. It is work. It is effort. We have to be very careful with our thoughts, particularly when we're going through hard times, because most of our thoughts tend to keep us stuck. If we're going to think about anything, let's think about this one thing. What is the solution to my pain right now that I can actually enact? And then that's what we work on, so that we may all truly have astonishingly beautiful lives, no matter what. Thank you for joining me on the Happiness Podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, please go to happinesspodcast.org. And until next time, accept what is, love what is.